Good day, everyone. Let's get started. Welcome to the Chesapeake Foodshed Network's virtual food system webinar series. My name is Yona Sipos, and I direct program development for the Chesapeake Foodshed Network through Local Concepts LLC, a social enterprise providing development and backbone support for the CFN. I'm joined today behind the scenes by Christy Gabbard, owner of Local Concepts and Network Manager, and Sonia Kiner, CFN Local Concepts Communications Director. In addition, I am so honored and delighted to be joined by our resource experts, whom I'll introduce shortly, and by some portion of the 300 registrants from across the United States and even Canada. Welcome all. Before our main event, I'll just provide a very brief overview of the CFN. And share with you a little bit about the food system programming that we offer. The mission of the Chesapeake Foodshed Network, as you see in front of you, is to catalyze connections and collaborations that help to cultivate a sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and equitable regional food system in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, including DC, Delaware, Maryland, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia. We believe that by catalyzing connections and collaborations, we are better positioned to accelerate change in and across our food system. The explicit aim of the CFN is to grow connections, get to know one another, share information, knowledge, and experiences to build trust and relationships such that over time we may align, collaborate, and collectively impact the food shed. The CFN has been developing over the past 3 years among those doing the extraordinary work to advance the regional food system. If you participate in or support that extraordinary work, as well as our vision and mission, please participate in the Chesapeake Foodshed Network. The CFN is open and free of charge to organizations, businesses, funders, agencies, and other change agents working across the Chesapeake watershed to grow a stronger and more resilient food system. In fact, anyone who supports the vision is invited to participate. Please visit our website, chesapeakefoodshed.net, to find out more and to sign up. One of the work groups that I just want to quickly mention, which falls here within the category of alignment, is our emerging and about to launch Community Ownership, Empowerment, and Prosperity Action Team. We are so excited about this. It is launching shortly, and it is meant to bring together resource and community-based experts to develop regionally focused equity guidelines to incorporate and inform all aspects of food system work. DC Greens, our partner organization for today's webinar, and in particular, Lauren Schwader-Bale and Asha Carter contributed a tremendous amount of vision and leadership to move forward this priority focus area and action team. And the CFN is incredibly grateful and very, very excited to launch this work. Please stay tuned for more information available on our website and via the Hive resource guide coming soon, or please email Christy Gabbard if you are interested in learning more. More broadly, the CFN supports food system programming across all sectors and themes. We host regular webinars and video conferences to provide a platform to catalyze connections around specific food system topics. We partner with resource experts who provide a quick learning opportunity through the webinar for food system change agents across the Chesapeake Bay region and the nation. And then during the webinar and the follow-up materials, we identify ways for people to continue to engage and dig in deeper around that particular topic. Finally, before I get to introduce today's speakers and turn it over to them for their exceptional presentation, I just have a very couple of Zoom housekeeping items for you. Zoom is the webinar platform that we're using, and on your control panel at the base of your screen where you see my video and the slides, you should see an option to chat. If you don't, you can just take your mouse and move it around and hover it around the bottom of the Zoom screen, and that control panel should pop up. Feel free to click on a couple of those options, including chat. If you open up the chat box, you'll see some messages from us, and also an invitation to introduce yourself, where you're calling in from today, and your affiliation. We'll also invite you to open up your Q&A box that allows you space to type in your questions at any time. We'll be collecting those, and Sonia will be moderating a Q&A session after the presentation. Next week, the CFN will send a link to the video recording of the presentation, and as well as follow-up resources and a post-survey webinar, which we'll actually send right after the webinar, and we hope that you will provide us with your feedback. It is now my very great pleasure to finally introduce the powerhouse of DC Green's leaders and changemakers who will be presenting for you today. Asha Carter is, I am gratified to say, a CFN steering team member, as she is a community engagement specialist at DC Greens, overseeing the Community Advocates Program. Prior to joining the team, Asha served in the Obama administration as the special assistant to the chief of staff at the US EPA. Dominique Hazard is another community engagement specialist at DC Greens, overseeing the Market Champion Program. Prior to DC Greens, Dominique was a Bill Emerson National Hunger Fellow with the Congressional Hunger Center, and worked as Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator with the global public health organization GlobeMed. Lauren Schweeder-Bale is the Executive Director and co-founder of DC Greens. Lauren is the co-chair of DC's Diabesity Committee within the Department of Health and served 2 terms on the DC Mayor's Commission on Healthy Youth and Schools. And the 4th presenter today, Mary Alice Riley, is the volunteer coordinator at DC Greens, managing the Farmers Market Brigade. Prior to joining the team, Mary Alice managed the farmers markets in underserved DC communities with Dreaming Out Loud, and served as coordinator with the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. It is such a pleasure to have all of you join us today to share your wealth of experience and knowledge. And I'll just invite our presenters to hop on, unmute yourselves, turn your video on, and start sharing your slides. Welcome, everybody. We are so thrilled that you're here. And I'm going to turn it over to our presenters.
Video up here. Hold on, back up. Here we go, and hopefully you can see us.
You guys look great.
Yes, okay, great. Well, we are so thrilled to be here, thrilled to have the opportunity to share some of the work that we've been doing and what we've been learning along the way. And we're also so excited to see how much interest there is in the topic of community ownership. I think we've all been blown away by the number of registrants that have signed up for this, and are just so thrilled to be here with all of you. Okay. Did not advance. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Okay. So just wanted to give you a sense of who's going to be presenting for you all. I'm Lauren, and I have here with me Dominique. We also are going to have Mary Alice and Asha. We are going to be doing a lot of choreography here, and actually we can't see ourselves at the moment, so hopefully we're in screen and looking all right. But okay, great. But you know, we're going to be cramming a lot into the next 35 minutes. So hold on to your hats. Here we go. So first of all, DC Greens, just to give you some background, DC Greens is an organization based in the District of Columbia that uses the levers of food education, food access, and food policy to advance food justice here in the nation's capital. We work across sectors, so we work, with schools in the healthcare space, with farmers markets, with government partners. We really believe in pushing towards large-scale systems change, and that we think that in order to do that, it really requires that we bring together a lot of different sectors where there are people who are really passionate about advancing this work together with us. We are both a direct service organization and an advocacy organization, so you'll hear about some of the programs that we run. A lot of them are sort of incubating program work that we hope and are working to move policy both sort of on the local level, but also as an example on the federal level as well. We often say about ourselves that we do the work of collaboration. So in DC, there's a lot of folks that are doing amazing work in the food sector, and we try and sort of occupy some of those spaces in between to really amplify everybody's work. We use a lot of different metaphors to describe ourselves. Sometimes we're grease, sometimes we're glue, sometimes I say we're a trellis for the DC food system. Sometimes I say that we are a bellows and we're out kind of looking for sparks inside of different sectors to really help make a flame. But really at the core, we believe that access to healthy food is a basic human right, and that's what we're working towards. So these are just some pictures from our work. We do large-scale citywide trainings for school garden educators. We run the city's produce prescription program. We have a 1-acre urban farm in the heart of the city. run the city's Produce Plus program, which you're going to be hearing about more. We partner with the DC public school system to support on a DC school food advisory board, and also on the good food purchasing program to help them think through some of their procurement. So just to give you a little overview of what we're going to do today, we're going to go over some terms and definitions, and then we're going to dive into our Farmers Market Brigade, our Market Champions program, and our Community Advocates program. But really our goal for this is to illustrate some of the ways that we've been building pathways for community leadership within our program work, within our policy work, and building pathways for community ownership within our organization more broadly. So I wanted to start by providing our working definition of food justice. We are a food justice organization, and for us, advancing food justice is really recognizing and addressing the structural inequalities in our food system. It shifts power and knowledge to community members, and practicing food justice leads to an equitable local food system and self-reliant communities. So in order to advance food justice, advancing community ownership is a really key element. And so we wanted to share with you some of how we define it. Community ownership to us is the most impacted people having capacity and agency to influence decision-making at multiple stages. It requires accountability mechanisms, and it results in the redistribution of power and assets. And the examples that we're going to share with you are some of the ways that we've begun this work. This is very much a work in progress, and we're really excited to kind of take you along our path as we're walking on this road. So I'm going to hand it off to Dominique for the next section.
Great, thanks, Lauren. I'm going to start off our story of building community ownership with the Produce Plus program, and first give some context about what that is. Produce Plus is a nutrition incentive program. It's similar to bonus bucks programs that are run at farmers markets across the country, except that Produce Plus is not a matching program. So qualifying low-income residents in DC can get up to $20 a week to spend on fresh fruits and vegetables at DC farmers markets. Folks can just come to the farmers market, show, let's say, Medicaid card or EBT card for SNAP, and then they're signed up, and then they can come to the market and they get Produce Plus checks that they can spend with the farmers. This program expands food access for over 9,000 customers in the city, and it also provides an economic boost for dozens of farmers markets across the city, providing an incentive that can help markets get more farmers to come and set up shop in low food access neighborhoods. An important thing to know as we go through this presentation is that we at DC Greens do not run any farmers markets ourselves. The markets are run by various different organizations in the city, but we do run the Produce Plus program at farmers markets. And so a key thing today that we're going to talk about is the fact that Produce Plus is not just serving customers. Customers are integral to the success of the Produce Plus program, and in connection, the success of farmers markets and low food access neighborhoods. We at DC Greens work to cultivate community ownership of the Produce Plus program in many ways, and the two that we're going to highlight today are our Farmers Market Brigade volunteer program and our Market Champion program. So we're going to start with talking about the Farmers Market Brigade volunteer program. So for several years, the Farmers Market Brigade has worked with customers who support the Produce Plus program as volunteers. When I first started at DC Greens, I was hired to do outreach for Produce Plus. So that meant informing customers about the program, but it also meant recruiting volunteers for the program. And volunteers are a really critical part of Produce Plus because they're the ones who are actually writing out those Produce Plus checks and giving them to the customers. And at some locations, because of conflict of interest rules, markets are actually not allowed to distribute Produce Plus without volunteers. So that means if no volunteers show up, there's no Produce Plus that day. And this was a particular problem, as you can imagine, and particularly at some of the farther out low income neighborhoods, because we were having trouble recruiting volunteers from our existing volunteer list to travel out to some of those neighborhoods. And so one day, exactly what I just described happened. Farmers market in Southeast was open one day and no volunteers showed up to the market. And so the market manager had to explain to the customers that because there was no volunteers, that there was not going to be any Produce Plus distribution that day. But luckily at the market that day was a group of senior citizen awesome women who call themselves the Golden Girls. And when they heard that, they were like, wait a minute, so you're saying that there's not gonna be Produce Plus today and the only reason is because there's not volunteers? Well, like, you know, we can be volunteers, we can help out. What do we need to do? Do we need to have some training? If so, can you all host a training at our senior center? We'd be happy to recruit some seniors to come out and get trained. Like, what do we need to do? Let's set this up. And so we did set it up. We did a training at the senior center, and those ladies and their friends are still some of our most dedicated volunteers today. And so this was a light bulb moment for me and for the organization, where I realized, oh, you know, we have a volunteer base right here in the neighborhood where this farmers market is. And it really just took a shift in thinking about the customers as, oh, the customers are folks who this program is serving, to the customers are folks who are really important and can help make this program work the best that it can be for the people of DC. And now I'm going to bring in Mary Alice, and she's going to talk some more about our Farmers Market Brigade volunteer program.
Hello. All right. Thanks, Toni. Great job. And thanks for everybody for joining us today. So I'm the volunteer coordinator with DC Greens, and the Farmers Market Brigade is a big chunk of my work. I work with over 280 volunteers over the summer, last summer actually, to distribute Produce Plus checks at over 30 markets across the city of DC. And just to paint a little bit of a picture, at some markets, volunteers can serve over 300 customers who are receiving $3,000 worth of checks, and that is a lot of work. So our volunteers are really on the front lines of making sure Produce Plus customers receive this assistance and that they have a positive experience so they come back again and again to pick up their checks. So we really value our volunteers' tireless dedication to the program. And as Dominique was mentioning, customer volunteers have really stepped up across the city to make sure Produce Plus is accessible and operating in low resource neighborhoods. And the program could not run without the efforts of our customer volunteers. 26% of the 285 volunteers last year were customer volunteers. So that's 75 individuals who completed 39% of the total volunteer hours across the city. So on average, our customer volunteers contribute twice as many hours as volunteers who do not receive Produce Plus. They make up our most frequent volunteer base. They are also some of our most dedicated volunteers. The top 10 volunteers in 2017 who contributed between 64 to 123 volunteer hours were all recipients of Produce Plus. And customer volunteers are more likely to return year after year compared to volunteers who don't receive Produce Plus. So for those who run volunteer programs, you know that volunteers with multiple years of experience and who are dedicated and show up consistently and frequently, that greatly improves administration of the program and the experience of people who are receiving that assistance. And so they really up the game for our within our volunteer base, and also they improve the experience for our customers. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about a new leadership role that we introduced in 2017. In 2017, we started recruiting volunteer leaders onto the Farmers Market Brigade to make sure that we had consistent and reliable coverage at markets across the city. This picture features Victoria Greer on the right. She's been one of our most active volunteers in the Farmers Market Brigade since 2015. In previous years, she showed up every week at markets in her neighborhood. Sometimes she would travel to 2 or 4 markets each week just to make sure that she was she was giving back to the program. And Victoria is also a recipient of Produce Plus. So in 2017, we said, wow, there are all these volunteers who are really stepping up and going above and beyond. We need to create a role that formalizes that effort that they're putting into the program. So we recruited volunteer leaders like Victoria Greer and other volunteers to be assigned to markets across the city where they would show up every single week to supervise and monitor other volunteers, troubleshoot the technology associated with the program, and monitor customer care so that they could step in at any point when anyone had questions or when there was any type of like challenging situation that someone with more authority needed to intervene with. And so volunteer leaders received additional training on skills like conflict resolution and technology troubleshooting. And they also can receive additional benefits like transportation stipends to compensate them for their effort and their time. Volunteer leaders are truly the bedrock for the program, and many volunteer leaders are also recipients of Produce Plus. So this next slide kind of lays out, the orange bars represent volunteer hours that were contributed by volunteer leaders who also received Produce Plus. 15 out of our 25 volunteer leaders in 2017 were Produce Plus customers, and they provided the majority of volunteer hours in wards 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8. Wards 5, 7, and 8 in DC are the areas of the city with the lowest food security. So the volunteer leaders who are also recipients of Produce Plus, contributed 100% of the hours in Wards 7 and 8, and really stepped up in Wards 5 as well. So administering Produce Plus in those areas of the city would not be possible without the leadership of Produce Plus customers. And so to wrap this up a little bit about the Farmers Market Brigade, we just want to recognize that the enthusiasm and the dedication and leadership of Produce Plus customers as volunteers serves as a reminder that many program recipients are capable and willing to do more than be served. Also, it's really helpful that large-scale programs like Produce Plus have a wide reach. Since we served over 9,000 customers in 2017, it is a great opportunity to reach in to that customer base and try and identify and support those impacted community members who wish to take on leadership roles in the food system. And as you heard, some of our outstanding volunteers really modeled the behavior for the volunteer leader role, and that is true also for our Market Champions and Community Advocates program. It was Produce Plus customers who really showed us how they wanted to take on leadership and make the program really represent their needs, interests, and skills. So I'll hand it back off to Dominique to talk about the Market Champions program. Thanks, everybody.
What is Market Champion? Market Champions are Produce Plus customers that DC Greens hires to support the Produce Plus program. They're doing outreach, they're there at markets to help customers, and they're also there at markets to help market managers with line management, with conflict resolution, with any other support that's necessary due to the large influx of customers that Produce Plus can bring to a farmer's market. We created the role of Market Champions and decided to hire customers to fill those roles because as an organization, we were really starting to recognize the knowledge and the expertise that Produce Plus customers have about the program and about their neighbors and their communities. And we wanted to value and support that knowledge and expertise. This is a picture of me and some of the Market Champions last year. And so one of the key things that the Market Champions do is outreach. Everybody does outreach. I do outreach. And so when I started at DC Greens, I was doing my street outreach. I was putting up flyers, making connections with community institutions. And I kept meeting people who were doing a lot of the same work that I was doing, but honestly, were doing it better than me a lot of the time. I met Hattie, who many people at DC Farmers Markets are familiar with because she's that woman who's going around and taking extra flyers every week just so she can pass them out to people in her building and people in the street. I met Beatriz when I was at a farmer's market just after she had recruited a group of strangers to get off of the city bus she was riding and come to the farmer's market and try out Produce Plus. I met Patrick, who was a senior who was taking it upon himself to interpret for his fellow customers at the farmer's market in Chinatown. And I met Donna, who was a customer at the Deanwood Market, who I noticed was always sharing recipes and cooking tips about different types of fruit and vegetables with her fellow customers. And so through the Market Champions program, we try to find these folks, folks who are invested in the Produce Plus program, invested in their neighborhood farmers markets, and who are trusted information hubs in their communities and support the inreach that they're already doing. And what we've seen is not only does this help bring more new customers to the market, it increases customer engagement at the market. Last season, we did a survey of Produce Plus customers comparing markets that had market champions and markets that didn't. And on average, customers in markets with market champions were 12% more likely to report that they tried a new fruit or vegetable. And we think this has a lot to do with folks like Donna, who are out there being market champions, helping people navigate the farmers markets and the Produce Plus program. In addition to doing in-reach, market champions are playing a big role for cultivating community at farmers markets in DC. Sometimes folks think of farmers markets and underserved communities as being important just as food access points. You know, we need to set this up, and this is a place where people can come and get food. But what we were hearing from customers is that folks wanted more than that. They wanted vibrant community spaces. And so we support market champions in creating this at their markets. Sometimes it looks like planning special events. This photo is of a family trying out a new recipe at the Ward 8 Market Day last summer, which the Ward 8 Farmers Market Champion helped plan. But also our customer volunteers and our market champions, both of these group of people are shifting the vibe of markets just by being there. Having Produce Plus customers in visible leadership positions disrupts norms around white and upper class saviorism, around farmers markets being like white spaces and healthy foods as white choices. And so and in doing so, this increases the effectiveness of the program because it helps ensure by creating more comfortable and vibrant spaces at the farmers markets, we're helping to ensure that customers want to come back week after week and get produce. And then finally, I want to talk about how with the Market Champion program, we are really trying to invest in moving Produce Plus customers up the ladder of community ownership. So here in this photo, this is Rose. And Rose started out as a Produce Plus customer, then she became a Produce Plus volunteer, then she became a Market Champion. And now Rose actually serves on the Produce Plus playing team, which is a group of market managers, DC Green staff, and now customers and volunteers who come together every winter and make the decisions about how Produce Plus is going to work and what the program is going to look like during the next season. And so for me, the takeaways of my time working with the Market Champion program is that it's so important to respect the expertise and the skills and the knowledge of program recipients and to compensate folks for that knowledge, expertise, and skills when possible. And also I think what's important to note is I've learned that supporting this type of leadership takes intentionality, it takes planning, it takes patience with challenges. During last season, things come up, things happen, especially if you're working with folks experiencing food insecurity. And so some of the market champions experience evictions. Some of the market champions had their phones cut off during the season. Some of the market champions were learning for the first time how to use apps and Google Drive and filling out timesheets. But because we recognize how important their contributions are, I learned how important it is to make the type of investments that are needed to make it work and make sure that they're able to move into these leadership positions. And so because of these investments, we've seen that some volunteers, market champions, and other customers have become interested in the food system at a whole nother level. They've become interested in the budget. They're asking, well, how does Produce Plus get funded? How can I make sure that the program has, you know, the money that it needs to function next year? What are policies that are impacting, you know, urban agriculture in the city? And so we've seen Produce Plus customers move into becoming advocates for just food policies. This is a photo taken in 2016 during the DC budget season. And this is a photo that has 2 market champions and 2 volunteers. And the Produce Plus program, when this photo was taken, had $0 in the proposed city budget. And when Produce Plus customers heard about that, they mobilized, and particularly the customer leaders, the volunteers, the market champions mobilized. They came out to testify. They brought other customers who they were connected out to testify. And through their support, we were able to get $1.2 million at the end of the day in the city budget for Produce Plus. So now I'm going to turn it over to Asha to talk more about community ownership and advocacy.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Asha. And so in this picture that you're looking at right now, on the far right is Miss Beatriz. And so this was the spring of 2016. As Dominique mentioned, there was no money put in the city budget for Produce Plus. And Ms. Beatriz was really motivated to advocate for this program. And she said, well, I want to circulate a petition. I know that I have a lot of neighbors who would support this. And we hadn't done petitions before, but we were like, sure, Ms. B is enthused about this. And so we're going to invest in her being able to, supporting her to create her own petition and circulate it. And in a weekend, Ms. Beatriz got over 200 signatures in support of Produce Plus. And so there was this incredible energy that we hadn't recognized before. And so we were starting to think really deeply about how do we invest in folks doing the work that they want to do in advocating and building their own power. We realized that we should be using our organizational resources to help build inroads for food insecure residents to shape policy. And so then we decided to launch our Community Advocates program to do just that. These are a few of our community advocates on the steps of the Wilson building, which is our main governmental building here in DC. So the Bane Quote that we've been wrestling with as we have been on our organizational journey to trying to create a more just food system, both inside of our organization and outside of it, is this quote, "Nothing about us without us is for us." And so it's a quote that came out of the disability rights movement, and really saying that policies that are being made about people without their active input is policy that's not actually going to work for those people. And that it's really necessary that folks are meaningfully involved in the decision-making around the issues that are going to impact their own lives. And so we wanted to invest deeply in community members to be able to have that engagement. And so our Community Advocates program provides training, mentorship, and compensation to folks who have a lived experience of food insecurity, to support their development as advocates for just food policy in DC. A lot of the spaces where decisions are being made about folks' lives in DC around food, and I think you'll maybe hear that these things are pretty similar in lots of places that you are as well, that a lot of the times there's nobody in the room who has a lived experience of food insecurity. And it's often mentioned that we're missing people from east of the river, we're missing people from Ward 8, and there's a desire for that added community perspective. And so sometimes meetings are moved to the evening, or there are tweaks that are done here and there to try to make the spaces more open. But still what you see is that the majority of the people who are in those spaces are folks who are paid to be there. And so we thought that it was important that we really deeply valued the input, the expertise of folks that we were working with, and people who've had such a huge impact on our programs. And so we thought that it was important to value them in the most literal way that's possible inside of our system, which is to pay them. Also understanding that the opportunity cost for people who have a lived experience of food insecurity to participate in these spaces is greater, the things that people are missing out on. And so trying to make sure that you're supporting people in the most active ways possible to be able to access resources and build power. And so a lot of this had to do with us for identifying existing assets in the community. Ms. Beatriz was an existing asset. She was somebody who was already pulling her neighbors off of the bus, talking to people, getting people additional access to resources, and then getting people access to more information about how they could be making greater change. So people who were already doing their own outreach, folks who were already doing their own research and inquiry, asking questions, people who are your volunteers who are already offering their time and expertise. There are people who are always giving you their opinion. These are folks who are assets. And so we were trying to figure out how is the best ways to invest deeply in our assets. And it really looks like acknowledging the expertise that they have and the information that they have to give, and then supporting them with the tools and resources in the spaces to be able to make those changes and make sure their voices are heard. So our trainings look like generally twice weekly meetings. We do trainings on the food justice and the food system, the industrial food system as a whole, on the DC legislative and budget process, on being an effective spokesperson for an issue, and on community organizing and advocacy strategies. And so we really want people to have a full toolkit to be able to operate in these spaces, giving them as much context, as much as our organizational privilege and inside knowledge as we possibly can, so that they are able to use that to be able to build power in the spaces. These community advocates also attend a number of external meetings in the community to be able to learn more about issues, bring that information back to each other so that they can strategize together about how they want to move. So they've also testified at a number of budget hearings and legislative hearings on grocery access and urban agriculture, and a number of other issues across the city concerning food justice, issues on our plan for the city, our sustainable DC plan for the next 20 years, they're giving input on what their community should look like. And so by being in these spaces, they're not only building knowledge, but they're building relationships, and they're shifting the conversations that are happening in those spaces, and they're contributing to the national policy conversations. And with each time that they're in a room, they're changing the assumption that, well, they're changing the circumstance that people are not in the room, but they're also changing the assumption that like maybe these people don't have things to offer, because every time these folks are opening their mouths, they're giving you something. And it's been really great to watch them sort of raise their profile and begin leading the community charge around these issues. So last fall, fall of 2017 in October, we held our grocery walk, and advocates, our community advocates, as well as volunteers and volunteer leaders, helped us pull together a grocery walk, which was a walk from one of the grocery stores in Ward 8, the only grocery store in Ward 8 actually, that serves about 98,000 people, from that grocery store to downtown Anacostia, which is a more densely populated residential area. And so that's where a lot of people are making that journey in order to get access to groceries. And so we walked that distance, and we had about 500 people come out. And it was a really strong moment for community members, and people who are most impacted by these injustices, illustrating to the system that this is really, really important to them. There had been this misconception that people didn't want healthy food or didn't care, weren't concerned about the environment. And this was a really big opportunity for folks to counter that. And it was really powerful to see people in the street who didn't even know that the grocery march was happening, to come out and put their fists up, and to come out and join the walk themselves. And it was so easy for people to understand how these issues were all connected, and that they should be the ones leading the charge on what happens in their own communities. So it's been really awesome to be able to work with advocates as they build their own power and profile to be able to engage in these spaces. So this is Toni. She's one of our advocates who's been with us since March of 2017. She's a Ward 8 resident. She's really passionate about grocery store access, and also about access for seniors, and specifically about the role of community being really necessary in conversations about what happens in these actual communities. She helped plan the grocery walk. She spoke on the stage during the grocery walk rally, really talking about community ownership of the food system. And we put together this video, there's a screen cap from on the left, of Toni taking her journey from her home to the grocery store and back, and just what that means for the quality of her life and for the quality of life of many folks who are in this situation. She's also been featured in NPR, and several of our advocates have had the opportunity to talk to a number of publications and really elevate the profile of the issue. And so their speaking for themselves is always going to be so much more powerful than us as an organization speaking on their behalf. And a lot of our approach has been to try to shift from our voices being the center to their voices being the center. And so the grocery walk and a lot of this press has been really connected to that. And so these opportunities have helped them to change the way that these policy conversations are moving to be more relevant to people who are actually experiencing the issues. So, you know, Miss Beatriz, she's now been a community advocate for a year. She's been with DC Greens for, I think, 4 years now. She's built a number of inroads with policymakers and community leaders, and is planning to run for the Advisory Neighborhood Commission, which is the most local level of government in DC. She's also been invited by the Capital Area Food Bank to advise their partner pantries, because other organizations are trying to figure out how to best support small community advocacy programs among their own membership. So we've learned a lot of lessons from this work that we've been doing. I think the first one is that the work of building community ownership doesn't happen unless the inclusion of community members is really explicitly prioritized in your work. And that really means budgets. Budgets should reflect your values. And so for us, it looks like making sure that we have people on our payroll who have this expertise and who we're just supporting them to be able to advance their own work. It also requires flexibility and time to make these meaningful investments. So setting aside the time for your staff to manage people and walk alongside people. And it's like Dominique was talking about in terms of, you know, folks having difficulties with technology or, you know, being evicted or having all sorts of things happen. And your organization, because of the resources, can be the space to be able to really support folks as they're going through that and as they continue to build their leadership. It's also not enough to have impacted people just in the room, because shifting the people who are in the room doesn't by itself shift the relations of power in those rooms. And so we are on an ongoing quest to figure out the best way to change the actual spaces at the same time that we're supporting community members to have better tools so that those things can meet together to be able to make stronger conversations. And for us also, this work, investing in it deeply, has meant really reflecting on our organizational identity and being willing to change that and changing our overall approach to programs. And so I'm gonna hand it over to Lauren, our executive director, to talk more about what that's looked like for us.
Great. So as we started engaging on all of the work that you've been hearing about, it really became clear to us that we hadn't opened up internal channels to discuss structural racism as a staff. And we really needed to do some level setting and collective thinking about how our work related to issues of structural racism. So we started building in facilitated anti-racism trainings for all of our staff, which, allowed us to start to ask questions about who we are as an organization, and really began to refine our focus. It allowed us to ask the question, what is our sort of best use as an organization in this moment in time? We'd always been a food education and food access organization, and we still do that work, but I think privileging the voices of impacted community members and trying to build in pathways for their leadership development really enrich the work to bring us to being a food justice organization. The other thing is that having individual cultural competence in your organization is not the same as building a culturally effective organization. And that's a term that I learned from Brandeis University's Institute on Assets and Social Policy. And so we really had to start analyzing our hiring practices with an equity frame, really recognizing that we're a white-led organization in a majority white nonprofit sector where leadership from people of color and people with a lived experience of food insecurity really has to be cultivated to increase community ownership of the food system. And I think we all need to recognize, those of us that are in nonprofits, the nonprofit sector is a major piece of the food system. And if we're going to be talking about advancing food justice, we all need to be looking internally and making sure that the practices inside our own organizations are really reflective of what it is we're trying to build. Another thing that we are doing is developing a community advisory council for the organization that's going to build in accountability structures back to us. Another really important piece of this is that we've been applying this fantastic tool from our friends at Movement Matters across all of our programs. We've been sort of assessing our programs using this community ownership ladder and identifying where we've been missing or ignoring the voices of impacted community members. We don't have a lot of time, but there's a lot to look at here. I think for us, really bracket movement is what we're looking for, making sure that we're moving out of degrees of tokenism into degrees of citizen power. Some of the examples that you've heard today, were moments where we went from informing people, really moving them into partnership and delegated power roles. And I just want to emphasize to people that are starting this work, participation without the redistribution of power just allows the power holders to claim that all sides have been considered. So you want to make sure it's not enough to sort of have a feedback session and check a box. You really need to build in structures where there's accountability back to the communities that you're consulting with and where they have multiple opportunities to impact decision making. So we're going to wrap up pretty much here, but a few things we wanted to leave you with as you start walking on this path. Start by recognizing that program recipients can be program participants and leaders in the food system. Be ready to allow your programs to be shaped by the wisdom and perspectives of program participants, and be ready and excited for your organization to change. We have one little plug here, which is we do have a how-to guide for building a market champion program coming out soon. There's going to be, I think Yona is going to share a little poll to find out if you'd like to hear more about it when it comes out. We also will have a how-to guide for our community advocates program as well. We'd love to hear from you about whether you'd like to get more information. And Just wanted to say thank you.
Hey.
Open it up for questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was great and fabulous work that you're doing. You have a friend in the chat box here, Molly, that says you guys are awesome. Yay, FMB. Amazing to see how,
Hey, Molly.
amazing to see how these programs are continuing and growing. There is a flurry of questions, so I'm going to apologize in advance if we don't get to yours, but we do provide our panelists with the questions in order to be able to follow up. People are very interested in your funding, where your funding is coming from for the Produce Plus and Market Champions. And they're very interested in the mechanics of how it works, you know, how are volunteers paid, how and when are people paid, how you decide how much to pay people. And then if you have any recommendations for working with funders, donors, leadership, boards, to advance this type of work?
So many good questions.
Yeah.
Should I start with the funding and then we can talk about, okay. So our work is funded in a lot of different ways. The Produce Plus program is primarily funded by the DC government. That's something that we and a number of other organizations and customers sort of continue to advocate for. And, you know, so there's a good and solid funding stream from the DC government. We run that program together with the Department of Health. We also get additional funding from foundations to support the Market Champions program, support additional components of that work. The Bane Foundation has recently joined us as a funding partner for the Market Champions program specifically, which we're very grateful for. The Community Advocates program was something that was funded initially through a Voices for Healthy Kids grant, which is the American Heart Association together with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. But we're really fortunate to have a number of funders in DC that provide us with general operating support and really understand that we will know best how to use that support. And so, there's many funders that support our work and allow us to kind of shape the programs as is most needed in the DC food system.
I'll say I think a big thing for us has been just asking for it. We have been getting some funding. We've been getting funding from the DC Department of Health, and last year was the first year where we included money for Market Champions actually in our ask, and decided to make the case that Market Champions were integral to the success of the program and to see what happened. And then it turned out that, they agreed with us and included funding to pay Market Champions. So I think that's just the first step is when you're writing your grants to go for it, to include it. And as far as what we pay people, I think there's a range between all of our programs. With the Farmers Market Brigade, volunteers who do a certain number of shifts, who are really high volume volunteers, receive transportation stipends to help them out with those costs that they're incurring for helping out with the program. With the Market Champion program, our goal is to pay a living wage. So this summer we're going to be paying $15 an hour, I think. $16. Yeah, I think we moved up to $16 an hour. And then
the community advocates are all paid $20 an hour, and the ones who are second level advocates, who were community advocates with us last year for the first cohort and are now on again, are being paid $22 an hour.
And I just also wanted to pick up on, I think it's very important that we all start talking to our funders about the need to be investing in community ownership. I think that, there's sometimes there's a complicity that happens between nonprofits and their funders because of the sort of inherent power structure that's there. And I think that, sometimes nonprofits will end up framing their work only in terms of how many, numbers of people were served, or, how many pounds of food did you grow? And there's sort of a set of metrics that have been developed over time as the language we think we have to speak with each other. And what we've found, and I think we've been very fortunate to have a lot of really wonderful funders in the DC area, you know, many of whom are actually also funders of the Chesapeake Foodshed Network. So we're lucky to have a lot of enlightened funders in this area. But, you know, what we found is as we've started these conversations, you know, they are also really eager to dive deeper into some of these sort of more meaningful and longer term systems solutions that aren't just about giving people food, you know, today, knowing you're going to have to give them food tomorrow and the next day. It's, you know, I think there's a recognition that things are not shifting with that model. And the more that we engage in real conversations, you know, we've just found that the funders here at least are eager for that. Did we cover everything in those questions?
I think so. Yeah, thank you. That was great. Someone wants to know if Produce Plus has an impact on FMNP redemption rates. How does DC FMNP redemption rate compare to national rate? I have a technical question.
Do you want to answer?
Sure. So FMNP, both senior FMNP and WIC FMNP are both qualifying programs for Produce Plus. So anyone who receives either one of those programs can sign up for Produce Plus and get Produce Plus checks. And we've been able to have really great partnerships with both of those programs. We haven't evaluated the specific impact of Produce Plus on FMNP redemption, but I know for senior FMNP, we do have a pretty good redemption rate here in DC, and we also have a high redemption rate for Produce Plus. This year it was like 93%.
It was 93%
yeah.
redemption.
So the redemption rate for Produce Plus is 93%. And in some of the early years of Produce Plus, we were able to do some research and see that Produce Plus correlated with higher spending rates of SNAP at farmers markets. So we think that it is a tool that is really helping to get people at farmers markets learn that farmers markets even accept SNAP, and then more people end up spending, you know, other benefits besides Produce Plus at farmers markets once they get there.
Great. Someone wants to know, you talked a little bit about your market champions are involved in the planning of your Produce Plus program. Are they also involved in evaluating the programs?
Well, I mean, I think there's different levels of evaluation. You know, in terms of the actual kind of, you know, we have a automated, or what's it called? Like a, you know, we have an electronic system here. So, you know, there's a level of evaluation that's just, you know, pulling data, which, you know, almost anybody is involved with except for a set of computers. But in terms of, you know, the effectiveness, I think, you know, we've certainly engaged. I mean, you can speak more to it.
Yeah, so we do surveys periodically throughout the season with Market Champions. That's more targeted with evaluating the Market Champions program itself and thinking about how that's going, what additional support they need from us and from market managers. And then at the end of each season, we have a feedback session with Market Champions where they provide their thoughts about the Market Champion program and the wider Produce Plus program. Also in the past, we've had open feedback sessions where each market champion was able to host a feedback session where they could recruit friends, neighbors, customers who they felt that the Produce Plus program should hear from, and then we co-facilitated those feedback sessions with the market champions.
Great, thanks. Another technical question here. How is the PP check cashed, used, and how do the farmers redeem the value they receive through DC Greens or the farmers market?
So what we've done in DC is actually sort of use a WIC check kind of model. And so people receive checks that are basically live checks, $5 increments that and the farmers are pre-certified to be able to receive those checks, and so the farmers basically are able to take those checks and put them in the bank directly. And then we reconcile, you know, we because we are using an electronic system and an app, you know, we're able to reconcile, you know, people who has been spending checks and, you know, and where. So I hope that answers you.
Thank you. Mia here says it's fantastic. Your anti-racism work is fantastic. Have you been able to engage the farmers market managers and vendors in any of that work as well? How have existing markets received the new customers coming to the market through Produce Plus InReach?
That's a great question, Mia. As we know, farmers markets are public spaces where a lot of different types of people of different identities come together, and we have started asking any distributors, so any farmers markets who want Produce Plus distribution at their farmers market to happen, their staff are asked to attend an anti-racism training that is facilitated by a contractor that we identify and hire and work with to come up with a anti-racism curriculum that is relevant to market managers. The vendors also go through, when they're applying for the FMNP, there are some components of cultural competency included in that training, but we have probably more to do around reaching vendors and really figuring out how to work on that urban-rural divide and the different types of dynamics that come up in a farmer's market where rural, mostly white farmers interact with Produce Plus customers who in DC are primarily people of color and immigrants.
Yeah, and just to give some context on kind of what's happening, and we revamped for this year, but what we're going to cover is histories about racism in the food system, just some overall level setting so everyone gets on the same page about like what racism even is, and then some practice going through role plays, thinking about different situations where market managers can help make their spaces more, you know, welcoming anti-racist spaces. In terms of like how have markets received the new customers, I think overwhelmingly it's been great. We have had, you know, some issues, which is why a big part of why we have these trainings. I also think that something that's come to light is, like Marielle said, the markets are bringing together a bunch of different people, and the Produce Plus program is as well. And so sometimes what we've seen is like inter-group tensions, for example, between African American customers and Chinese American customers. And I think that's also a great a place where market champions come in. So for one example is we have the Bloomingdale Farmers Market in DC, where a lot of African American customers come to get Produce Plus and a lot of Chinese American customers come to get Produce Plus. And we were seeing that there were a lot of miscommunications, misunderstandings happening in the lines. And so for that market, we actually have two market champions. One, Patrick, who I think y'all saw in a picture, who's Chinese American, and one who's African American. And those market champions are working together to make sure that communication is happening between customers. So that's another important role of the market champions.
And just to add on to that, I think it's really important that, you know, I think there's sort of a misperception across the country that by having an incentive program at your farmer's market that you are somehow creating inclusive market spaces. And I think, you know, that's not true. I mean, just having people of color at a farmer's market does not intrinsically make it an inclusive space. And I think it is that realization that we had a couple of years ago is, you know, that helped us realize we really need to be doing these anti-racism trainings. We really need to be having these market champions positioned. So again, I mean, we are learning as we go, and as we're kind of realizing these new things, we're constantly trying to adjust to make sure that we're keeping pace with our knowledge gain.
Great, thank you so much. I'm sorry we have to wrap up the Q&A now because there are really so many questions. And
touch with us. Give us a call. You can see. Look at this.
Great, thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. And I'm just going to extend the thank yous and the appreciation and the gratitude for this incredible presentation. Questions are continuing to roll in. We will share them with you. People want the details. They want to know your process. They want to know how it's all rolling out. And also they want to express gratitude for you all taking the time to share your work and also to continue this work with putting together your how-to guide. And there was a great deal of interest. If people didn't have a chance to fill out the poll. You can always email me, yona@chesapeakefoodshed.net. I'll make sure to pass it on to DC Greens, or just email this incredible team. We have Toni's grocery run video up here and also on our website, as Sonia posted. Get on the DC Greens website. I don't know what else to tell you. There are resources there, there's listservs, there's opportunities to volunteer and learn more. Also, please join the Hive. You can do that by checking out chesapeakefoodshed.net. We will be sending you a survey shortly, in the next few hours, hopefully, and we would love to hear from you what else you want to learn about, what other programs we can do to help move the needle forward, help support community ownership within the Chesapeake Foodshed region and beyond. And of course, what's not on here but should be is that keep your ears and eyes open for information on the CFN, Community Ownership, Empowerment, and Prosperity Action Team, which will be launching soon. And we will have a video conference on that coming soon that will be launching the invitation to participate. We have some food safety webinars coming up in April, as well as a food and resource recovery work group meeting. Thank you all. Thank you to the resource experts for your time and your presentation and sharing this knowledge and these incredible insights. And thank you all for registering and for your interest. We will be following up within a few days with the recording, the slides, etc. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, and you at the next event. Please be in touch if you have further ideas for programming. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.